Hello everybody and welcome to episode 56 of Behind the Camera with Andy Games, the podcast where we shine a light on the storytellers, the creatives, and the voices behind the camera. This week, my guest is veteran podcaster Kurt Sasso, host of Two Geeks Talking. We dive into Kurt's extensive journey in podcasting, his experiences interviewing creatives across all types of industries, and the key lessons he's learned along the way. Whether you're new to podcasting or a seasoned creator, this episode is packed with insights and inspiration. If you'd like to support the show, head over to the About section where you'll find a link to my Linktree. This has everything from social media pages and merch to the website and much more. Like, share, follow, comment, or leave a rating. Every little bit goes a long way and I truly appreciate it. Now, here's the interview. Kurt, welcome to Behind the Camera with Andy Games. Pleasure to have you on the show. How are we doing today?
Pleasure being on here, Andy. You know, I love the fact that I just happened to be on social media one time. I see a person, a host needs a guest, and of course our mutual friend Rena Friedman said, "Hey Kurt, you need to be on the show." I'm like, "All right, done." Here I am.
Absolutely. And yeah, massive thanks to Rena as well. Absolute godsend. She essentially got this one put together and thank you for stepping in because it was a very, very last minute thing. And I do appreciate your time and I'm looking forward to chatting. Really, really am looking forward to chatting. So yes, Kurt, you are the host of the Two Geeks podcast. And this podcast has a very extensive roster, if we could say. A lot of episodes, sure. A lot of interviews, and it's a lot of fascinating people who you've chatted to and got their stories. So can you take us back to the start of your podcasting journey with Two Geeks, or even if it goes before Two Geeks?
Well, Two Geeks Talking is the final name, so to speak, of this show. When I first started this way back in 2008, a good friend of mine, Phil, and I were putting together a webcomics.com podcast. Rather, I should say he was putting webcomics.com together, which was a database of webcomic independent comic creators from around the world. And so it was kind of like a website for a database of search for your favorite webcomic creator or favorite webcomic, and here's the person and here's the contact information, away you go. Anyhow, that since went to Brad Geiger, of course, who runs webcomics.com now for his own amazing work that he does too. Long story short, I said the famous line before it became famous, "We should make a podcast." And so because he was busy with the site, he goes, "Go ahead." And so I had no knowledge about how to be a host, how to run a show, how to even put on a podcast for that matter. But I wanted to interview these talented and creative people in webcomics because that's what I was passionate about back then. And I still am now, almost 20 years later, 17 years later now. And so it was crappy audio. It was guests that didn't know how to introduce themselves but made it through a 2-hour live show like what we're doing here, and there was no filters. There was nothing stopping us from talking about anything and everything for 2.5 hours. At that point in time, it kind of got along the lines of I'd interviewed almost 600 webcomic creators by year 3 of the show. I was getting burnt out. I needed to change pace, so I needed to take TGT webcomics to a new level, which became Two Geeks Talking show or podcast. I call it a show. And so I switched to video. I went to video in 2012, and I haven't looked back since. And video kind of gave me that avenue of how can I be engaging with the guest, with the person, whoever I'm speaking with. So I went to comic conventions. I was interviewing people in the comic scene and entertainment and music and video games. I was just really branching out into that entertainment circuit because I wanted to just give myself a break from just talking comics. And I found an audience, found a bit of a platform for myself, a very inclusive platform for everyone as it is. And it's just kind of snowballed from there. And I actually, and this is kind of funny because being on this show and whenever it gets released here will be the start of the 17th year of Two Geeks Talking. So there you go. I'm almost at my 20-year mark there.
Brilliant. Yeah. Like I love how deep the journey for your podcasting
Yeah.
goes, especially when, you talk about you wanted to interview all these things, but at the same time, you don't really know how like the setup goes, and then your guests kind of not really knowing how to introduce themselves. It just almost falls into the stereotype of people starting out in their podcasting, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
and it's I look back in these things and I just think everybody has to have that. Everyone who's getting into podcasting just has to have that, because I think we all did. I think it's a rite of passage at this point. Like sometimes not everybody is a natural storyteller,
Right.
and but then on the other hand, when you're just starting out as an interviewer, sometimes you don't really know how to kind of carry that and get more out of your guests, and then kind of rein it back in. And but in a sense, sometimes they do make like the better conversations if it is just tangents after tangents. Now it may kind of fall out of the point of what you're talking about, which you don't want to do too much, but at the same time it can just make for entertaining conversation. So and also apologize, I did get the name of your podcast wrong. Two Geeks Talking. It's when I was referring to my notes, I had it shortened down, but I apologize. So whenever you were getting all this practice then with the interviewing, like how did you sort of find, was there like any particular point that you found like it's like, okay, this is a good structure on how to interview people, how to utilize active listening? Was there a point in your time when you kind of figured out how to kind of do this more comfortably?
I think you're still finding that in some way, shape, or form, because it depends on the guest. No guest is the same, so you're still finding out how to ask the right questions, how to still engage in active listening and all that. But for me personally, I had a lot of co-hosts when the show started. So Phil was my very first co-host, and he was very energetic and very personable, and he could really carry a conversation. For me, I call myself an introverted extrovert, where I'm introverted, but when I need to be extroverted, I can be. Doesn't mean I don't drain my social battery. It just means that I can manage most social situations. So by episode 61 is kind of when I was like, okay, I have to take the reins of the show. Phil had to do other things with life, and I started trying to find my own path and find my own way of asking questions and asking the questions I wanted to ask, and dive into the creative process and really kind of find what makes a creative person creative, because I had an IT background, so very logical, very ones and zeros type situation. So finding my own voice, if that's the style or in question you're going for, has taken a few years for me, at least 5 or so years, to finally figure out what style I want to ask. And for me, I'm more like a Tim Ferriss style, like get those introspective questions in, because I think you can only ask so many creative questions, like process and things like that. But once you dive into the introspective nature of humanity of a person themselves, you can find that deep underlayer that they don't actively think of. So I think that kind of brings Two Geeks Talking from just a traditional entertainment show to here's an introspective show inside the actor studio, but with entertainment people. So I think it's taken me a few years to find my footing.
Yeah, and like everything that you say there about, especially with every guest being different, you do have to approach things differently, because if you're speaking to somebody for the first time, you don't necessarily know how they're going to interview and how they're going to respond to the questions. And I'm sure you might have had this. In fact, I can probably guarantee you probably have at this point with your experience, that you have a question that you want to ask, and you fully expect it to be, it's an open-ended question, but you fully expect it to get a really nice, long, detailed answer. But within about 20 seconds, they're done and giving you answer, and you're kind of like, oh, okay. How do I kind of recover this and continue this on? So whenever then you sort of went from being like solely a webcomic interviewer to interviewing other types of creatives, did you feel like the sort of structure of your interview style changed with that, or did you always kind of keep the same philosophy of like asking these introspective questions and just sort of gauging it by the creative that you were talking to?
No, I didn't gain the introspective questions until many years later. I've been struggling to put together a documentary for the past 12 years called Little Person Amongst Media Giants, and there are 4 introspective questions that I wanted to ask Stan Lee. Of course, didn't happen, but I ask those same 4 introspective questions to every guest that I have on the show. And so that's kind of how I've evolved as an interviewer, because I had the standard strict, how do you draw? How long does it take to do a page? What is your writing process? All these boring questions that 90% of shows out there ask. While valid information to get from the guests, it just can wear on you after a while. I mean, it can be a little too much. And then you get those pulling teeth guests, like you just mentioned earlier, and that's only happened 5 times in over 1,200 plus interviews. So I can count that on one hand. But finding myself as an interviewer, regarding your question itself, is it changes with the times. Here's a perfect example. The first time I went to a comic convention, I had a list of every single creator I wanted to ask questions for. I had a list of questions that I was going to ask them. At one point during my 80 plus interviews I did in that 4-day weekend, I put my cue cards down that had all the questions of all the guests that I wanted to do, and I lost them. So some comic creator in Webcomic Pavilion back at C2E2 in Chicago back in 2012 has like 300, cue cards of questions and names and guests and email addresses and everything like that I was using as, my thing. So I had to go off the cuff. I had to learn how to ask 4, maybe 5 questions at most for a quick 5 to 10 minute interview per guest, because they're trying to sell and I'm not trying to impede with their business. So from that point, I think from 2012 to what I'm currently doing, I've evolved my questions. I've evolved myself as an interviewer, and I like to get questions that kind of give people pause to think about, this isn't the question I'm normally used to ask. Like, I'll give you a good example. I asked Conor McCreary, who does a YA book called The Last Witch. This is more recently, actually. I asked him, what's a song that your main character would hate but secretly need? And he went into like a 90s reference of Third Eye Blind, Not the Wallflowers type, he Jumper, things like that. He just had a great conversation about 90s alternative music, from his days when he was growing up. And it's like, okay, well, that's a good question. Then I asked him what phrase would he tattoo on his body. So questions like that cause a chuckle, exactly like you had there, was just something different and unique that I'm sure he hasn't been asked whatsoever. So
yeah, I love that as well, because I'd see this in clips on social media quite a lot, and it's somebody being asked a question, but it is very much off the cuff like that, and it's very kind of like a on the spot kind of thinker. And it's the sort of thing I do look at these and I think I would love to be able to ask these questions, but maybe it's like a sort of, I don't think I'm not a quick enough thinker, or maybe too structured or something. But I do love that. And I think, like, I can't really speak too much for podcast guests, because I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I've done it myself, but I feel like it's something I would like. So I'm sure that other people do as well, because it's a bit of fun. But the reason I asked you about the whole development with the interview style questions that you do is because our stories will be kind of very, very similar, because whenever I started out doing this, I used to interview solely Twitch streamers and TikTok streamers, like who like played video games online, and that was where I started. And you do find, you did webcomics for much, much longer than I did the streamers, so I think the scale is completely different. But I do understand what you're saying about, in terms of, like, it does get a little bit jarring at times. You do find yourself asking the same questions. Like, I was thinking about this earlier on, and I used to basically like format the same questions, just in a little bit of with a bit of a different spin. Yeah. And it would have been 4 or 5 questions that I would have asked these people. And I almost found that sometimes I was having these conversations that were going on for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And don't get me wrong, they were good conversations, but I almost found that I was almost trying to fit far too much into this time. And then you look at the retention on your analytics and you're like, oh my God, no. It's like, I enjoyed the conversation, but man, like, I mean, these people aren't having it. So I don't know, but but it is just interesting how you develop. And like, when you are talking to different people, like, and I mean, whenever I was interviewing, for example, when I was interviewing streamers, these were people I knew. So doing like the research into the guests wasn't really a thing. It was just more of a case of I knew these people. I just had to kind of engage with them in the most minimalistic way. I know it sounds so lazy, but like that's just the way it was, because it was like these were already people I knew. And it was like, okay, let's, find things I don't know about them, but here's what I do know, mixing in the two things. But then when you're interviewing other creators, it's a case of you have to kind of look into them a little bit in terms of their resources that they have there, like whether it be like IMDb or what's on their link tree, their website, things like that. And I have definitely learned that less can be much, much more. Yeah. Like I would honestly say, and I'm sure it's probably the same for you. Like when you kind of get your episodes down to 45 minutes to an hour, that is that sweet spot. And you realize that you have actually got so much more out of that from just a couple of notes and just back and forth conversation than any 2.5 hour episode that's been over structured can really give.
Yeah. And this is something I've struggled with a lot, because my old episodes are 2.5, 3 hours. I had one that was 4+ hours long. That's my longest interview I've ever done, which actually with Trevor Mueller, who has been a guest on my show 11 times over the past 17 years. So that's not too bad for almost like one a year, so to speak. But do I release those old episodes? Do I go back to the archive in 2008 to 2016, let's say, and re-release my old stuff? The climate's different. Stuff that we may have said 17 years ago may not be relevant in this day and age. Doesn't mean that the information isn't valuable. It's just, it's a different climate. So, that may remain in the vault, so to speak. But the research side of things is how do I know the guest? Have I ever interacted with them before, whether it's social media or whether it's at a comic convention, or am I a fan of their work? Do I know what exactly they're doing? 90% of the time, I don't know who they are. But that's only because I'm not as well versed in the content as I was years ago. The time is the main factor, obviously. So, but every conversation is new. Every conversation is fresh. Whether you've been on the show 5 times, 11 times, or this is your first time, you're still that same guest that I'm going to remain professional with and ask the questions I want to ask you and bring you out of your creative shell if I need to. And, I want you to share your story and your content of what you're creating, whether it's comics or a TV series or a film, or, you're creating your very first EP, or you happen to be an independent video game publisher, or you're working in the AAA studio. The format is still the same. The questions are different, but how engaging you are with the host makes me more excited as a host to keep asking questions. And then it's a matter of, oh darn, now I have to edit an hour and a half down to under an hour. I still know my retention's only going to be about 30 seconds, but still, at least it's 30 seconds I didn't have before, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. I think like any podcaster can say that they've been there. They've looked at their retention and been like, oh, that is, that's a 30, but not 30 minutes. It's 30 seconds. But I mean, that's...
didn't carry decimal place over, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, I that was the thing whenever I branched out as well, like into different types of creatives, you genuinely like, it's like you say, well, you couldn't have put it any better. Like the format stays the same, just the questions are a bit different, but you're only really kind of going off a few different bits. And you could obviously like active listening and how well the guest engages is huge as well, because if you have like maybe a few bullet points of things that you want to ask, you don't want to get through that too quickly, obviously, and it has to feel natural at the same time. But I think when you do an interview style podcast, like the thing you want to avoid is it coming across as too formal and just being like question answer. Now there are elements where it can, but if it can be very obvious if someone's asking a question based on what they have just been told by the guest, then you know, that you can tell as a listener that that wasn't planned. They're asking because they've just heard this. It's active listening kind of thing. And like that was something that I was maybe about 8 months into this whenever I learned that, and I look back and it's almost embarrassing. Like I was just like, wow, I had this so like over structured. Now it's just like, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's easier. No. You know, it's easier for sure.
Yeah. I think though it's not about structure; it's about finding your voice, and I think that's difficult when, like, you've already been interviewing people before, so you kind of have a feel of your voice and your style, but that's going to evolve. You keep doing this for as long as I have, and then it's like you're going to change formats. You're going to try to do shorter episodes. You're going to try to do longer episodes. You're trying to ask, say, 10 to 15 questions at most of the guest itself before you wrap up. That's kind of a good framework that I've come across that seems to be working. Do you get to all 15 questions? Maybe. It depends on the guest. Maybe there's questions that they've already answered in previous questions, so you're not going to obviously reiterate those types of questions. Are you going to make short form content out of your long form content? You know, are they a paying client or are they a free client? I mean, there's obviously different avenues for getting into this for what you want to do, but for me, my focus has always been the people that are watching this or listening to the show aren't here for me. They're here for the guest. And that's kind of been my mindset for when I ask my questions, because I would rather have a person that talks for 2 hours than, you know, me having to talk for 50% of that time. So that's why I ask the questions. I still do banter. A lot of the stuff that you see in my edits, you're not going to see all the humor and the jokes and everything like that I say between questions, because it either doesn't fit or it could be just it doesn't fit the flow of the actual interview itself. Doesn't mean I won't leave some of those in, because, you know, hey, it was a funny bit. I might as well leave it in and it flows into the next question perfect. But that's more of an editing choice on my side of things. So you'll find your style for how it is. If you let this go raw and you don't do any editing, which I did for at least 8 years when I first started, it only got to the point where I'm showing a 2-hour episode, or I'm playing you have a 2-hour podcast, a 2-hour episode, and no one's going to pay attention for 2 hours. No one's going to sit there for 2 hours for that particular style. So that's when I started to do editing. That's why I started to really be like vicious with the dead air, with the ums, the the ands, those dead filler words. And it's because I wasn't editing for video. I was editing for the podcast. So when you see my videos and you see the head jerking around of the guest or whatever, that's me viciously cutting spaces and dead air. Yeah, it doesn't look great, but the audio side of things, you can still hear the message, their message, whether or not they went off into 3 different tangents, or, you know, they actually got to their message, did their tangent, oh wait, they went back to their message. So let's remove stuff, things that don't fit the itinerary of the question. So not many people do that, but if you put the time into the finalized product, I think the end results speak for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I have heard a lot of people who will be that stringent with their editing. They would like you say, they would get rid of the dead air, the ums and ahs and everything. And that's not something I would do personally. And like, I don't know. I think there's like arguments for and against, really. Yeah. Like it's one of those things. For me personally, I look at it, it's like this is the conversation at its most organic and its most authentic. But then at the same time, like on your side of things, like it can really affect the retention of the audience listening, because sometimes people, I've had this happen to me in my early episodes, people just be like, you know, you say this a lot, and I'm like, oh God, thanks for bringing that up. But then at the same time, you kind of can look at that in future episodes and be like, okay. And the thing is, because when I used to do this live, people picked up on that. And I would see my chat coming through live, and I had to like ignore it, but I had to monitor it at the same time. And if I ever said something that I said a lot but didn't notice, my chat would have been flooded with just whatever that was. And I just had to like not break character and just continue on with my interviewer voice and just focus, and then just sort of you just see my eyes kind of thing. I'm like, oh no. I completely appreciate the whole editing side of things, but like at what point then, like obviously you've been doing this for such a long time, like at what point did you really think, okay, I need to be this strict with my editing, I really need this to kind of fit this time? And what do you do with then the bits that you cut out? Do you keep them for like archive footage, or do they just go?
Blackmail. No, no, I wouldn't be in the business this long if I did that. No, I I think it really depends. It's been a long time since I let an interview go from start to finish, and I think the most recent one was Richard Sparks, who's a British author out of Canada. He's in BC, I think, who roomed with Douglas Adams for his elementary, middle school, whatever, high school days, for a number of years. So he got to see Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in its earliest formats. So yeah, it was pretty amazing in that respect. And his conversation was very organic. It flowed. Like the questions I asked, he'd answer. I'd pick up on something else that he would say, but it wasn't one of my questions, so I'd ask something completely different. And it just flowed. It was just like back and forth, and an hour went by, and it was just like I didn't realize the time went by so quickly. It's amazing. And so I just put that up raw. I just cleaned up the audio a bit, but I didn't do very much editing whatsoever, except for maybe my questions weren't as tight. So I tightened that up a bit. I think. Sorry, go back to your question real quick because I'm losing it.
The other part of the question was, at what point did you realize that you wanted to be that stringent with your editing, and then the bits that you cut out, what you do with them?
Right. Okay. So the editing side of things, it's just, I think 2016, I think, because I was in university, I had to release 42 interviews in 42 days. Yeah, it was a news article for the Windsor Star that I did, and it's just something I want to. No, I did. I was trying to do 30 interviews in 30 days. I did 42 interviews in 30 days. That's what it was. And so I was just massively doing so many interviews, just one after another, while doing a double major in visual arts and film. And so my time was very limited. So I needed to edit. I needed to be tight. I needed to be vicious. Just needed to get to the point of whatever I was talking about and just put it out there, and away I go. So I think that was kind of the starting point. I was like, this actually still sounds good. This is great for a podcast. People are picking it up. It's getting good downloads. All right, well, now I found a style that works for me, and away I go. And so that's worked out well for me, and I've kind of continued that on. It also helps me if I have, say, a guest, let's say, has spoken for 2 hours, and it's just like, no one's going to listen to this. At what point can I cut this down to maybe an hour or less, if I can, and still retain the message of what they wanted to say? And I had to do that more recently once, which I'll never do again, to have a 2-hour interview, but still I can't control what the guest says. So it is what it is. As for the remnants of, say, conversations or whatever, that never sees the light of day, it's not because it isn't good. They're probably on a timeline attached to the edit of my stuff in DaVinci Resolve, so it's there, but whether or not I decide to put it all together, because I have so much content, if I were to put together a blooper reel of sorts, or if I were to put together blubs, or, far be it for me to put together something that's incriminating, which I wouldn't. I'm not saying that anything like that has ever happened on my show, just to let everyone know that. Is just something that is just there. Maybe it'll be used for short content in the future. Who knows? It's not that it was bad. It's just it didn't fit that conversation. That's all.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Like, I've always wondered this, because you see sometimes people have interviews, but especially when people do it live, I've seen like a lot of live podcasts, and it's like all of a sudden it's an hour interview cut down to 35, and you kind of like, how is this kind of? But that makes sense. And I suppose it is one of those things where I'm sure you have to be incredibly strict with what you are cutting out, and you obviously have to go back and review the entire interview and be like, okay, I can maybe cut this out, and like, That's a lot of work. That's like probably a lot more work than most people would do
Yeah.
with their podcast. But then obviously, if you've been doing this for what 9 years, that's like, well, you've been doing the editing side of things. I mean, for 9 years, like
No.
that's kind of, yeah, sorry, like the editing side of things for 9 years, like that's kind of, I suppose that's probably just routine at this point, like just going into DaVinci and putting it in and
Yeah, it's a longer. You're right. It is a very long process. Do I absolutely need to do this? No, I do this because it just the message is clearer. I think it's because I do video editing and I work in the TV and film industry as a DIT. I work with the computer a lot. I mean, I was in IT for 20 years. What you know sticks with you no matter where you go. So it's a good thing to keep up on your skills, kids. So I think for me, you also kind of remember it when you're listening back to it. Yeah, you'll see the waveforms and you'll see, oh, this is an you can hear it as it goes, and it's like, all right, well, I'm going to take this section, I'm going to highlight as much as I can in the thing, and then I'm going to chop as I go. Most of the time for me, it's just cleaning up the audio because obviously with Google Meets or Zoom or whatever, it's very bassy. So whenever you hear my audio, when you get this back, it'll be nice and clean the way I like it so that my voice doesn't sound horrible. And I think it just comes down to listening to the message. Like if you've already cleaned up your question, then you took the start of their answer, the end of their answer to your next question. Okay, now I have 3 minutes to work with. Okay, now I can cut this part, this part, this part. Oh, they had something good to say here. Maybe I'll color code it as something to come back to, as maybe as a short or something like that. Maybe it'll be used for promotion, a trailer or something for the interview. Maybe it's something I want to put at the very beginning of the interview to draw interest to the interview itself. You know, I kind of have different color codes for different things as I go, but yeah, it's just practice time. How much time do you want to put into this? Do you have another interview you have to edit? Like, what is your personal time when it comes to this stuff? Like as much as we love being hosts, it's the underlying side of things, the editing, the social media, the promotion, the contacting other guests, all the things that people don't see. People see the final product. They don't see all the hard work. It's that iceberg effect, you know?
oh, absolutely, absolutely, and like arguably this is the most fun part of it, but like that's because like it's the easiest part and the most fun. But it's like you say, everybody doesn't see what goes into it. They may see your clips, but they don't know what you've done to create that clip, make it what it is. They don't know what your DaVinci Resolve looks like, and 99% of the time it's a mess. It's an absolute, especially like. And whenever you're saying about like fixing the audio or like, oh my days, like I did an interview recently with somebody and they're like the sound came through fine on my headset, but whenever I put it into DaVinci, the levels did not match. But it was like quite painfully obvious. So I had to, thankfully it was one of my shortest episodes. It was only about 25 minutes. Okay. So I had to go through and cut every single answer and every single thing that he said, even like the little in between. Whenever I'm talking, he's like, oh yes, yes, yes. And then like had to like cut every single bit, adjust the volume so it matched, which was like a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And I think it took me longer than the actual episode length to edit. And I managed to, like, I listened back and I was like, okay, I've got away with this. I don't think anybody's going to notice that I've had to change the volume. But like, it does make you appreciate the amount of effort that sometimes you have to go through, because it's like you say, like, you know, through Google Meets, for example, it comes across a little bit bassy, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's with experiences where you're gonna notice that. So like, say for example, if I upload this as it is, you'll notice that and probably hate me for it, but obviously I'm not going to do that. So I completely like, and there is like so much that goes into it, but it's just sort of putting a pin in the podcast side of things for a second. And I noticed on your YouTube you have a series, Mastering Podcast and Video Interviews from Geek to Guru. What can you tell us about this? And obviously you have the experience, so you're the go-to guy for podcasts. So what can you tell us about like the inception of this series?
Well, it was something I was trying because I just needed a break. I think I was just, it was one of those things where I had nothing scheduled interview wise. It was the end of the year kind of thing, and I needed to do something different, a little fresh. It's not finished, by the way. That series is definitely not finished whatsoever. It's a good chunk of the way there, but it's not quite finished per se. So I have like a spreadsheet and a document with like all of my episodes laid out, and I think I had like 60 episodes scheduled or planned. I think I only did 10 or something like that. But that was something I wanted to try to do because I've gained so much knowledge and experience over the years. Is it going to help everyone? Absolutely not. Is it a be all end all guide for podcasting and video interviewing and being a host? No, but it's what's worked for me and my equipment, my setup, and my style for creating graphics like lower thirds. I do custom lower thirds, and I do custom title images that are different than whatever AI can hurl out there. And it's just human ingenuity, creativity, and effort. Really is what it is. I want to put my effort towards something that leave a lasting impression. Do something that is unique and different. And here's what's worked for me. Will I bring it back? Sure, eventually, if I'm not busy. But I've picked up a few other paying jobs, so I've had to put that aside and kind of go from there. I will bring it back eventually. I will complete the series. It'll be up there for free, and whoever enjoys it. And I got some good positive comments from some of the interviews saying, keep it going. This is really good stuff, and I really learned something. And I'm like, great, I've done my job then. But it's fun. It's like, it's very interactive. I have graphics, I have video clips, I have audio clips, I have imagery, and it's not just a standard person talking head there. There's stuff you can actually see, so it's not just my ugly mug for, an hour or 10 minutes or whatever it was. So, it is what it is.
Yeah. I definitely think it's something that's beneficial for interviewers because, like, as we talked about, like, interviewing, it's a constant learning curve. Every single interview that you have, there's always something you can look back on and think, okay, I could have phrased that differently, or maybe I stumbled over my words a little bit. I know personally I have that one every single time. Like I'll get halfway through interviews and I'll just be sitting like, I probably really didn't phrase that question the best possible way. So I'm really surprised that they knew exactly what I was trying to say. Thankfully, I've never had the issue where people have just been like, what?
Well, I'm thinking back to some of the answers I've given you. I'm just like, oh yeah, I definitely have stumbled on my words there. If I was editing this, that'd be gone. No one would see that whatsoever. You got to keep up with persona, right?
I think that's the thing I like about it though, because I think this kind of comes into why I don't really edit, because like we are human. And like this is it's like an informal chat and storytelling, and like you and I both have similar views on storytelling in terms of that. Yeah. Everybody has their story to tell, and it's like somebody's story is no more or less important than anybody else's, and there's always something for somebody to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in your time you've heard way more stories than you can probably count at this point.
Yeah.
From so many different creatives. And I did actually notice as well, that we have a mutual guest in Matt Drago.
Oh yeah, Matt's awesome.
Yeah, he was so awesome. Great. I had a chat with him a few months back and talking about his movie, and he was an absolute gem of a man. How did you come about chatting to him? Did he reach out to you, or
how did that happen? I get a bunch of PR emails sometimes, and it might have been through that. I'm probably misinterpreting it, or it might have been a connection through a connection, like what Rena did for us type deal. It might have been one of those things. I honestly can't recall, to be honest, at this point, but I think it might have been a PR thing. And one of the PR guys that I've been communicating with a while, he's the one that got me Biff Naked for an interview. So that was an awesome 30-minute conversation. And if you got me Matt as well, then Eric, I appreciate your help on that one too. But that was a great conversation. I mean, we had a great talk, I think, and very personal, very outgoing. I want to get on his podcast. I think his wife has a podcast I've been trying to get on, so that'd be an interesting conversation to have that side of things. Look, I may be a host, but I'm always up for shilling myself out as a guest. Okay, so if anyone else wants me as a guest, I'll be happy to do that.
You've got to. You've absolutely got to. There is just something about being a guest when you spend so much time in front of the camera, talking to people, asking questions. Sometimes you do want to be on the other side, and but that itself, though, like that takes a lot of practice as well. Like if you think being a host is a learning curve, being a guest is something else. Like I said before, you can kind of one hand the amount of times I've ever done it. But how do you find it in your personal experience compared to being a host, having obviously been doing this for as long as you have?
I think it's fun only because I don't do it as much as people that go on other shows. I think this year alone, like one thing I wanted to try to do, like every year, is to get on other people's podcasts. It's just something I just set as a goal for myself. Something I've always wanted to do. Something I never really get to do. So I think last year I did 5 interviews. This year I've done maybe 10, something like that. So I think it's just getting myself out there, because as good as social media is for getting guests and as for promoting your episodes and things like that, less than 1% is going to see it. So if you're not talking about your own show on someone else's show, then you're doing it wrong. Or because no one's going to pay attention to you. You're not going to be in love. What's that phrase? You're not going to be in love with yourself as much. No, I can't say that one. It's something along the lines of, if you're not talking about yourself, no one knows about it. I'll paraphrase. But because if you don't share that, yeah, I have a podcast, I have a show, I've done 1,200 interviews, I've been doing this for 17 years, since 2008. I was on a pod. I created my own show before Mark Maron and Joe Flippin' Rogan. So, not that I'm bitter or anything like that by not having their wealth or fame, but still, it's, I was there well before them. So it's like,
You do have to acknowledge that, though, 100%. Like when you see the likes of Joe Rogan, and you're just like, I've been doing this longer. Like what the? I fully get it. I mean, like, I mean, I've obviously not been doing that long, but I can empathize as much as I possibly can on that one.
Yeah, with rich people, right? Yeah.
That's a case of them. That's a case of them or already having a platform and using podcasting
I'm not a comedian, sorry.
Yeah. they kind of cheated. They didn't build it from the ground up. Like they, not like us grassroots podcasters.
Yeah. We had to scrape and claw our way using free services with 56K audio for 8 years. No, I'm not bitter. Why? Why do you think I'm bitter?
Exactly, yeah. So obviously then, with the amount of episodes that you have done, you've done over 1.2k interviews in your time, and like, how do you find the time? Is this like a sort of, you will find yourself maybe doing interviews all day one day and then you'll kind of release them sporadically, or is this very much a kind of, you'll have a big backlog and you can just upload as and when you feel like, to kind of keep some consistency?
I used to do that. I'm not saying I did it every day, but for a good 10 years, I did three to 4 interviews every Saturday from 11, 1, 3, and 5 p.m. Eastern. And I learned a few things from that. One, I think the quality went down in terms of just my energy, because and that was just one day a week, but still, you have to edit it, you have to put it all together, you have to release it, graphics, etc., social media promotion. Find a good release schedule. Oh, do they have a Kickstarter or a crowdfunding campaign? Oh, they want to be released at, the little things that pile up. And for me, it was just, I was burning myself out. And I think that's why I switched to video as well. It's like, look, I'm only going to release 1 episode a week. It's going to be on, say, Friday at 11 o'clock or Friday at 7 p.m., whatever it is. And if there is a paying client that wants an interview that wants it released sooner, by all means, they get first priority. Tell me when you want me to release it. Boom, it's there. Away we go. But it's usually Fridays at 7 p.m. or 11 a.m. I think it just depends on when my schedule gets released. Anyhow, But what it comes down to is uh, I've stopped burning myself out with the interviews. I have a free schedule that is only in one time slot for Saturdays at 11 a.m. I'm booked usually a year in advance. Um, a lot of people come to me during the year and it's like, hey, can I get interviewed on this date? I'm like, here's the schedule. Find what works best for you. Oh, I can't find it. Okay, well, there is a paid option that allows you to pick any day of the week, anytime you want, and we can do it that way too. It's a 90% no on that, but the option is there. And I've been doing this show. I was doing this show free for 15 years. I think I'm not saying owed, but I think I'm due some type of payment for my services rendered.
Oh, 100%. Like you've got every right to ask for it, especially considering that if you have people reaching out to you, maybe if it's more people are reaching out to you than you're reaching out to, then, and if you booked a year in advance, then of course, and if people are trying to, because well, okay, let me ask you this then. Like, how many people do you get? Like, I know you mentioned about the paid clients, but like, how many people do you get reaching out to you, filling in your schedule form that you have in your link tree? How many people do you get who are just like, I'm represented by such and such. They want to talk about this product that they have on your podcast. How many people have you had in the past reach out to you like that, and you're kind of just like, no.
No, I haven't had anything like that because my well, maybe I have, but I've just, if they're a PR person for a marketing company or something like that, it's like you don't fit my genre of my interviews. It doesn't matter if you have a business like that or not. Now, if you're a PR agency for, say, an acting or whatever, then sure, yeah, let's talk. Let's have some, that's part of the entertainment field, so to speak. But to go back quickly to my point, for the paid side of things, it's not because you're paying for an interview, you're paying for a service. And what you're paying for specifically is my years of experience. You're paying for my ability to create short form unique content based on your conversation with me, tailored to your product that you are trying to sell. So it's not just the interview, just to make things clear on that respect. It's just, this is what I can do. I went to school for visual arts and film. I have a background in social media. I have 20 years of IT experience, and I've been doing this for 17 years. I think I'm doing okay in terms of that respect, but I want to still showcase yourself and your comic or entertainment field or whatever it is to the best of my ability, and that's what I'm offering you in terms of what I can do. And that's why I started doing a paid service for clients and things like that, because I know I can bring more to our conversation than just our conversation. I can give you that visual aspect, the visual twist that really highlights yourself as a creative person, maybe that you're not able to do by just speaking the words. Maybe I'm using your images or B-roll or something along that line that just gets you to that next level that's really unique and really different. And maybe for the 30 seconds or a minute clip that I use, it's like, okay, I'm interested in this. How do I get it? Insert link.
That's totally fair. Like, I mean, I think obviously after the time you've been doing this, I think you've got that kind of down to a T. It's like, well, I mean, yeah, especially with the amount of burnout you've had over this time, like you've got to kind of just do it in a way that it works for you. And if a paid service works for you and somebody else who wants to be on the show, then yeah, by all means. So when somebody does utilize the paid service, then does their episode then sort of jump the queue and then be the next episode released, and all the other episodes will maybe get pushed back a week? Is that how that would work?
100%. Yeah. It's not like I have a set schedule. It's not like I schedule in advance. I'm really on a one interview by one interview basis for my release. So by default, everything will go in the YouTube queue for a scheduled premiere on Friday. But if a guest is a paying client and they say, well, I have a Kickstarter campaign, when can we get this released? I go, well, what works best for you? Do you want this on a Monday? Do you want this on a week 2 or week 3 of your campaign? Do you need this on a Wednesday? Like, do you want this at the very beginning of your actual thing? Like that's how accommodating I am, because it's like, why am I delaying your service when I can easily get it done within at least 48 hours for at least the main content? And the main content itself then allows me to, okay, now I can start adding images. I can start adding these little extra flares that you don't see in normal content. Like I had a DC writer from the Bronze Age of comics on the show, and I didn't have to, but he was talking about all the interviews he did with current and past writers and artists, and talked about the multiverse of DC and Marvel and things like that. And it was just like, he's talking about these people that are either have passed on, that only has like a static image on a Google search, like, let's put a face to his conversation. Let's put a face to his name. So I'm not a heartless, soulless corporate shill type thing. It's just, I want to showcase and use my creative talents to highlight that type of conversation. And I think that one worked out really well. And I'll send you the link after. But it's just like, there's so much you can do with this. You can spend so much time making a video perfectly amazing and wonderful, and add all of this content on it, only for it to get a minute or 2 minutes of view time, and then swiped away or clicked away or whatever. And as a creator, as a host, that's very disheartening. It's like, you put all this time into it. Why aren't you watching at least 5 minutes? Give me some type of thing, because I'm not monetized. I don't have any capability of being monetized on YouTube or anything like that, because they took that away from small content creators like myself back in 2016 when they did their flush. So I have to make do somehow. I can't do this for free. And if I can use my skills that I've paid money to go to university, and based on experience and based on who I've interacted with all these years, then let me do that. At least I'm giving you something and not just taking your money and running.
Of course, absolutely. Like, and the experience is a massive one of that. Experience who you spoke to before in the past, and what you learned from like all your different guests as well. Like, it really does all add up. And end of the day, you have to make it work for yourself. That's the kind of most important thing, because like we do this because we enjoy it, but it also kind of has to make sense as to why. And we all know our whys, but it's like you're gonna have to sort of live up to that as well. So there's one more thing I would like to ask you just before we wrap up, and that is, obviously, with your wealth of knowledge of podcasting, your experience of 17 years, very cookie cutter question, I will admit this is, but obviously it's very, when it comes to the experience that you have, I think it is quite important. Somebody, obviously, with the age that we are in now, where podcasting is as big as it ever has been, for somebody who is starting out, what advice would you give to somebody who is starting out?
You're fucked. I mean, sorry. Didn't know if this was PG or not.
No, here, that's fine. I wanted to be as organic as possible, and that is probably the best possible way to do that.
I had to say that. That's right. No, I don't absolutely mean that 100%. You're 75% maybe, but it really depends. You're not going to be doing this for money. That's the first thing. So if you expect to be doing this for money, stop. Don't even bother starting. It's not going to happen. Not yet, anyhow. If you stick with it more than 10 episodes, maybe. Give it a couple of years. Sure, then start doing your monetization for it. Can never start too early. I think it really depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to do an interview show, great. Find something that you're absolutely passionate about. Find the guests that are absolutely passionate about it as well. And have the energy to have a conversation, at least a half hour. That's all you really need. You don't need an hour. You don't need 2 hours. Just 15 minutes to a half hour. Short, sweet, to the point. Ask your questions. If it goes longer, it goes longer. But stop at the hour mark. Whatever you do, that'll save your sanity in the long run. Learn some graphics. Don't use AI for graphics. Create it yourself. You'll actually take appreciation for creating your own templates. I do. I have a tab somewhere in those 300 off to my right there that are, that has all my graphic stuff on it for. I have software as well too. Affinity's worked out really well. One-time cost. You get your illustrator, your designer, your whatever else, and it's a one-time fee. Works for both Mac and PC. Use that instead of Adobe and Photoshop and things like that are actively taking your content to make their large language model AI generators, off your hard work. So keep it locally on your hard drive. find a good setup. Find, if you're going to do video, and then extract the audio as your podcast. There, you've done two things for the sake of one item. Why do you need to use a Riverside or whatever else to do your stuff? Find software that works best for you. If you're using Zoom to do this, sure, it's an old method to do, but it's worked. Until they close down Zoom, until they shut down XSplit, I'm going to keep using these two pieces of software. They're absolutely critical for what works for me, and I've had no issues with them, knock on wood. If you use things like Riverside, look at the terms of service. A lot of us are creating content for these third-party websites, and you have no ownership of them. You gotta watch out for that stuff, because that is your content, something you've created. So do that. Look into that stuff. Be aware. Be prepared for that stuff. Always have a local backup on your various hard drives if you have hard drives. Don't force it into the cloud, because who knows if you could lose access to that. I've had 2 hard drive crashes in 17 years. I've been able to save all of my content on separate hard drives because of my experience. So always back it up separately, somewhere else that is not connected to any electrical devices or whatever. Plug it in when you need to back it up, unplug it. It's safe for, 10, 15 years. You're good that way. But research. Use social media to ask for your guests. Best way to find guests. That's what's worked for me. Build your connections that way. Don't just ask for guests randomly. Build a rapport with them. Be engaging. That goes for podcasting as well too. If you're a host, you have to be a little engaging, at least some way, shape, or form. If you're not, why are you doing it? It can't be a personality quirk. Really can't be. like you really need to be actively talking with the people, not just reading your Word document of your questions and going one point to the other. Engage with it, joke with it, figure out what you want to do. If you have a co-host, stick with them for as long as you can, and if it works out, great. If you recycle out co-hosts, that's even perfectly fine. I've had 150 co-hosts in 17 years. So let me rephrase that. I've had 150 episodes worth of co-hosts. A lot of them were repeat co-hosts. Let me rephrase that. But if they work well with you, don't be afraid to ask for someone else to come on the show and give you a hand. Maybe you need that bit of a mental break, and let them take the brunt of the questions and engage with the guest. I had a student that came on my show that wanted to interview Danielle Corsetto from Girls with Slingshots. She's a huge fan of Danielle's, and so come on the show. Let's have our conversation. And I sat back for an hour and I just let her ask all the questions she wanted. I'm like, I'm good. You wanted to meet this person. This is the best solution we can do. Let's have at it. I'm glad I made your day. So enjoy what you're doing. Don't expect money from it. Eventually monetize it. Be engaging with your guests. Don't ask cookie cutter questions. For the love of God, don't ask cookie cutter questions. Ask the questions you want to get engagement in, that you're actually curious about, and then post it. Make sure you post it on your social medias. Make sure if you post a trailer for it, post it on a Monday if your show releases on a Wednesday or whatever. Do something that engages the audience in some way, shape, or form. And then keep doing it. Do that for as long as you can. If you do this for 5 years, great. If you do it for 10, awesome. If you get as long as I have done this, eventually you'll switch to some other format and try something different. But enjoy what you can and keep doing it.
Absolutely fantastic advice, and I do apologize. It was a cookie cutter question, I know, but I felt
you were allotted the one cookie cutter question. You're good there.
Yeah, I think they're titled 1 every 5 episodes, and that's fine. Got to wait till episode 61 now for this one. But yes, Kurt, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera with Andy Games. Thank you so much for your time. Just before we do wrap up, where can the listeners find you today and the Two Geeks Talking podcast?
Well, Andy, I got to thank you for so much. It's a pleasure being on the show. You got great questions. You're a very personal guy, and I really wish you another 5 or so years of this, however long you want to do this. So please keep it going. I appreciate that. You can find Two Geeks Talking at our various websites. You can find it on Spotify, iTunes, all those other podcasting platforms by searching Two Geeks Talking. That's TWO, not the number 2. That is not the podcast you want to go to. TWO Geeks Talking. Please Please get that right. The YouTube channel has a good chunk of all of our video interviews with a lot more interactive experiences in there as well, and a ton of short form content you can find too. That's youtube.com/TGT Media. And you can find me on all social medias either at Two Geeks Talking or at Kurt Sasso, KurtSasso. I'm the only one usually controlling all that stuff, so I respond to almost literally everything unless you're a spammer. Then you're deleted and away you go. But every episode usually releases every Friday, 11 a.m. or 7 p.m. depends on the time. And I've lost count. You got 1,200 plus episodes to go through. Have at it, enjoy it. I would love it if you would subscribe to the actual YouTube channel. That would really help me out. Comment and share the interviews that you absolutely like with your friends, because why am I doing this otherwise? Other than talking with guests? I don't know. Do you know, Andy?
No. It's a very good point. But once again, thank you so much, Kurt. Been an absolute pleasure, and I wish you all the best. And yes, for those listening, check out Two Geeks Talking podcast. And there you have it. That brings us to the end of episode 56 of Behind the Camera with Andy Games. A huge thank you to Kurt Sasso for joining me on this episode and sharing his story, especially on such short notice. This conversation is a true reminder of the power of networking, and I'm especially grateful to Rena Friedman Watts for making the introduction that brought Kurt and I together. Once again, if you'd like to support the podcast, my link tree in the About section has everything from socials, merch, website, all of the good stuff. A follow, rating, share, all goes a long way. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.